Alright, so in this week's lesson we're going to talk about slide guitar, blues slide guitar. So we're going to use the intro piece that I just played there, that little blues composition. We're going to break all that down note for note. That'll be our excuse for talking about slide and some of these techniques. So the first so I've got the lesson split into two parts. In this first video we're going to go through the technique, we're going to talk through tunings and different types of slides, how high your action should be, all of that stuff. Sort of the background information on slide. And then we'll go through the first half of what I played. If you'd like to learn the second half as well as download the tablature and also access the on-screen interactive tab viewer, which you can slow down sections and loop them and do all that fun stuff, you can get that by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page and do a search for EP434. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is gear. Let me just mention this guitar. This is a National, I think it's called a Resoelectric. I've had this one for a while, I've never used it in a video. It's a really cool guitar because it's thin and pretty lightweight, but you have this nice resonator sound even without it being, plugged in. It sounds pretty good on its own. There's a pickup in it, obviously you can electrify it. The action on this guitar is slightly high, but it's not much. It's, for the most part, it's like a standard electric guitar, like any electric guitar standard action height. So no matter what guitar you've got, whether it be electric or acoustic guitar, grab a slide and work with the action that you've got. I would say to do that first before you start adjusting action, because for the most part, standard action height is enough. It's a lot of slide is really about the light touch and being able to control your left hand. When you come down too heavy, with your slide, you'll bump the frets, and so that's why it's always a little easier to have slightly higher action, but it's not absolutely necessary. So don't spend your time in the beginning worrying about action height. Just grab whatever guitar you got, and obviously you're going to need a slide, and start working with that to start with. All right, so the next thing I want to mention is the type of slide. There's tons of them out there. My personal favorite, is to get a glass slide that's really thick. This is a Sonny Landreth, a good friend of mine gave to me several years ago, and somehow I have not broke this yet, but you can see it's a real thick glass. And it feels heavy, it sort of weighs on your finger a little bit. There's, obviously brass ones and, different types of material for slide, but I find that the glass ones are the best. It's really a matter of personal taste, though, so you're going to have to kind of play around with them. You can go on Amazon and, and order one that way. If you don't have one, there's lots of different ways you can get them. But the next question that people have is, which finger do I put it on? Do I put it on my pinky or my ring finger? Some people put it on their middle finger. I find that for the longest time I did use it on my pinky, but I found that the angle is actually easier if I put it on my ring finger, which is why a lot of people do that. It's because if you look at my hand here, it's arched. It's, my fingers are pointing straight up, and it's actually kind of an awkward position. And I find that with my ring finger, my finger sort of points this way anyway, and it just makes the angle easier than trying to do it with my pinky. That's just a hand preference, though. So you're going to have to kind of play around with that too. But that's just something else to keep in mind. Okay, now let's talk about tuning. Now you can play slide in any tuning, including standard tuning. It doesn't always have to be an open chord. It's a little easier if you tune to an open chord, which is what we're going to do in this. We're going to tune to an open E chord. But get used to trying playing slide in standard tuning, because most of the great slide players, they can play in just about any tuning. Standard tuning is nice because we know our fretboard that way. And also, you don't have to retune your guitar. There's a mental barrier when you have to get your guitar down and retune it or take it out of the case or however you get it up, pick it up. Versus just standard tuning, put a slide on your finger and you're ready to go. So for example, this is in standard tuning right now. I could do I've got these little open chord triads. This is in standard tuning that you can take advantage of with a slide on your finger. So that's something I'll do in a future lesson if there's an interest in that. Actually, leave a comment if you would like a lesson on standard tuning slide. I'll be happy to do that. But anyway, we're going to be in open E tuning. I'm going to show you how to do this. Open E is a great tuning for guitar because all of those visual anchors you have using the first string and the sixth string. So for example, if you play if you're in standard tuning and you play a G chord, a G bar chord, you know that you can bar on the 3rd fret. Well, if we retune our guitar to compensate for where these fingers are, you can play your slide on the 3rd fret to play the G chord. and also in open E tuning, you're leaving the first and second strings the way they are, and the sixth string. So you're really only retuning 3 strings, half of them, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take those first 2. Now listen, if we come down to the G string and we go up and make it G sharp, so we're going up a half step, you can hear that E chord. So now we've got 4 of the strings in tune. Now we're going to come down to our D string and tune it up to an E. So now we've got 5 of the strings, and then we're going to come down to our A and tune that up to an F sharp. So now we have an open E tuning. You can see I didn't get out a tuner for that. I just went off, using my ear there. It's pretty obvious if you get the sound right. All right, so now let's talk about muting strings. This is a big part of playing slide. For the longest time, I just played slide with a pick, which you can do, but the problem is you get all these overtones that sort of ring out and they kind of muddy the water a little bit. And so you can get a much more precise sound like this. A single note that just rings out. And actually that should be your first challenge, just making one note like that. With vibrato, you're not hearing any other strings ringing out. And so to do that, to play one note like that, let's look at the right hand. Now there's a little buzz going on. I apologize for that. I can't figure out what's doing that. But we're going to be playing the second string here, or this would be our B string. And so I've got 3 fingers down with my right hand. My thumb is on the 3rd string. My middle finger is on the 1st string. Those are just sitting in place to mute those strings so that they don't ring out. I'm going to use my index finger to pluck that B string, or that 2nd string. So that's the first thing you want to do, is make sure that your other 2 fingers are muting strings, the surrounding strings. That's how you have to think about it. So whatever string you're playing, use your other 2 fingers to mute the surrounding strings so that they don't ring out. So if you can do this, you're already a good percentage of the way there in terms of muting. The other thing I should mention is this part of my hand on my right hand here is resting across the other string. So I'm really only allowing one note to ring out, one string. Then with your left hand, you're going to come in and slide in to the note. So in this case, we're going to just play the 5th fret, 2nd string. But there's also muting that goes on with the left hand. This is something that I didn't realize for years. It wasn't until I saw somebody talk about it, actually, probably on YouTube. But there's muting that goes on with the left hand as well. So yes, the slide is coming into the 5th fret, 2nd string, but look at in this case, this is just my hand, but my index finger rests on that same string just behind it, just behind the slide. So it's resting right here to continue muting that. So it's just another little mute. It also gives me a feeler gauge. This is the part that I can't stress how important this is. I didn't realize this, the value in letting another finger touch the fretboard behind the slide, but it gives you more control. So when you do things like that, if I do that without having a finger there, I don't have as much control. It sounds a little sloppier. But when you have another finger there, you've got another anchor, it gives you a little more resistance on the string. It's not so slippery like you're walking on ice. You've got like a little bit of a grip there. And it actually feels good when you're doing the vibrato to feel, not with your slide finger, but with the finger behind the slide. It's moving on the strings like that. It gives you just a new sense of control. So that's the first thing I would say is get the muting with the right hand, and then get that little bit of muting behind the slide there. It'll make all the difference in the world and also give you so much more control. All right, the last technique I want to mention is the vibrato piece. And the vibrato you're going to find is easier down at this end of the neck than it is when you get higher. And that's because the angle of your hand changes the higher you get. That's harder for me than that. And so what you have to do with your hand is the thumb needs to be behind the fretboard about where the vibrato is. That's the key. Like nobody ever says this for some reason, but if your thumb goes back behind the neck, it needs to almost look like this in terms of profile. So wherever your slide is, right behind it on the neck is where your thumb needs to be. So if my slide comes up to here, you can see behind the neck there, my thumb is right behind it. And what that allows me to do is anchor my thumb so that I can go like this and get that vibrato. The vibrato does not happen with the shoulder. And for the longest time, my shoulder, my entire arm would move. And I would get tension in my shoulder when I was trying to learn how to play. And I realized when you really watch somebody play slide, they're not doing that. The action is all right here. It's like doing this. In fact, this would be a good way to practice it, is just do this with your thumb, because the thumb anchors itself and then the fingers move like this. You can see my shoulder is staying straight and the only thing moving, in fact, I'm doing that against the back of my fingers. This is a good practice for it. You don't even have to use a guitar, but just to get comfortable with that feeling of going like this. It's very awkward at first and it feels like sluggish and slow, but it's like a muscle memory. It starts to kick in at some point, and then all of a sudden, one day you just do it. So it's a combination of those things. I mean, there's a lot going on here with muting with the right hand, muting behind the slide with the left hand, and then anchoring the thumb right about where the slide is to give you that vibrato. But if you get all three things in sync, you start to get slide playing. That's really all slide playing is just control. It's controlling the extra noise that comes from using this slide on your strings. All right, so now that we have some of those techniques down and we're in open E tuning, let's talk through the fretboard and ways that you can visualize the fretboard in this new tuning. It's not as far off as you might think from what you're used to. So let's relate everything back to the cage system, for example. So remember, our 1 and 2 string are the same as they were in standard tuning. So that means if we think about our chord shapes, so you have your E chord shape down in first position, and obviously the 12th fret is the same, it's just an octave higher. So strings 1 and 2 open could represent an E chord, for example. And then if we were to come up and play an E using the D shape with caged, it would be right here, right? So these two notes would be something you could play over an E chord. Same thing up here, right? Using the top part of the A shape. So now I've got some anchors for where I can go. If I'm playing a blues in E, for example, even though it's an open tuning, open chord tuning, I've still got licks that I can use from my standard tuning if I just think of the first 2 strings. So anyway, that's one way to think about it. All right, so now let's break down this song. So remember, we're in open E tuning. So if I play all 6 strings open, it's going to be an open E chord. And it starts with this little intro piece that goes. All right, let's learn that. Now, all of that was played on the open D string. It was really just played on one string. Well, except for this, that first part. But the rest of it was all played on the D string. So, which is actually an E string now since we've retuned it. But we're going to start off with the open 5th string, a hammer on with index finger to the 2nd fret 5th string. Remember, you've still got 2 free fingers. Even though you've got a clunky slide on one of your fingers, you've got some free ones, so you can fret some notes. Then we're going to play the open D string. That's your little intro opening lick. And then we're going to slide up to the 4th fret, 4th string. And then I kind of went out of it like this. And you can see that letting that open D string ring out, which is an E note now. Remember that, you know, obviously we're playing over an E chord, so that's going to work. And then I can hit the bottom string, the 6th string, which is also an E, an octave lower. Then I love the sound of that. And if you really want it to growl a little, you can go. Or you play, you know, more string than one. But what I played, I came up to the 7th fret 4th string, slide into it twice, open D, back to that note on the 4th fret, and then open. And hear that open E string that keeps droning out? That's a real common slide thing, is you got the one note. You know, so that's something you'll hear a lot of slide players doing, is to take advantage of just one string like that. And then with my thumb I came down and hit that low E string. And then after that I went 5th fret 2nd string, which is also an E note. So I'm just playing a lot of E notes just in different octaves. Now that's using that technique we just talked about, playing that 5th fret 2nd string. So you've already got the technique down, hopefully. Even if it's a little clunky, that's okay. Just work on it. Try and isolate that note. And throw in the vibrato. And then watch this. I love that. Now you can hear rather, that it went into the 4 chord right there. Right? Even though it's the same note, I put another note underneath it, which was that C sharp note. Remember, in an A chord, you have an A, C sharp, and E. So that's where that note's coming from. And this is the way you think about it, though. It's just a visual thing. Here's your open 1 chord, right? Here it is an octave higher. Your 4 chord is always on the 5th fret. So your A chord in this case, right? Your 5 chord, you just go up 2 frets. And then you're back to your open 1 chord. So 1, 4, 5. So even if you get nothing else out of this in terms of blues or 1, 4, 5, you just play some licks, in the open 1. And then you go to your 4 chord. And then you go to your 5 chord. And then back to your 1 chord. Right? So that's kind of how it works, really. Okay, so when we slid into our A, I went like this and then went. Now I did this intentionally. I threw in these notes because this is a great practice in isolating notes and making them play on their own without any other resonance happening. Now that is harder than you think to do, because your natural tendency is to just go like that, and you're going to hear those other notes ring out. So you're going to make sure to control with that right hand so that those other strings don't ring out. And look at how my hand is resting on the strings to mute them. And then we come back to this note, which is our B note. It's another note in the E chord. So as I land on these notes, it doesn't always have to be an E note. It can be any of the 3 notes that live in the E chord, or even 4 notes, like if you think of an E7 chord. And that's really how this works, is knowing which notes to land on. How did I know to land on that note? Well, that's a B note, and in the E chord is a B note, right? So I just kind of know that, E, B, and G sharp. And so I've just kind of memorized these different positions. And so as long as you're landing on one of the notes in the chord, it's going to always work. It's going to sound good. Even, it doesn't have to just be those 3. It could also be the dominant 7, so you could throw in that as well. Okay. Down to your B, right? All right, so after this, after that B, I just kind of came out of it. It's like slid down, and then down to your open string. You could even throw in the bass note there. And then we stay on the E chord. So I throw in that lick. It's another just E lick. It's another hammer on to the 2nd fret. This time we're going to be on the 2nd string. And then you play the open 1 string. We come back to this E note, slide into it. Now I could have just went like this. That's also an E note, but listen how soulless that is. Versus, right? That's singing, singing with your fingers. Okay, and then the song goes to the 5 chord. And that's how I played it. you can see I'm just sliding up to this 7th fret, which is our B chord, and I'm playing the 2nd string, 3rd string, and then 1st string. It's just the notes out of the chord right there. And a lot of slide playing is just playing the chord, but going back and forth like this. Those little things, like if you just stayed right on the note, or right on the fret, that's kind of boring versus, you know, it sounds a little more like a vocal quality. And then, so I walked it down. So that's going 5, 6, so that's going 7, 6, 5. Now what is this note? That would be in the B7 chord. So that would be the 7, the flatted 7 out of your B. So just know it this way. This is how you can think of it. If you want to get that sound, that dominant 7 bluesy sound, wherever your main chord is, just walk it down from the 1st string 2 frets and just play that note. That's how I did it. And then I went like that. Slid up to the 4th fret, 1st string, all on the 1st string here. Open 1st string. And then we're going to repeat that. All played on the 4th string now. So you can see that my 1st string is an open E, my 4th string is an open E. So that means whatever I do on the 1st string, I can do on the 4th string. And then you play the 6th string and then the first 2 strings to come out of it. And that's really the first half of this. Let me back up. I'll play through it one more time, a slow version of it, and then we'll see you in part 2 where we'll go over the second half.